All right, last but not least, the 731 Runnymede item, which is number, what's the number of it, Jennifer? Clerk? 2615. So I guess we would start then with questions of staff from Francis, Councillor Annunziata.
So when we had the community public meetings that we've had over a year ago, we communicated to the public, and so we actually misled the public that this would be a temporary shelter. So why are we negotiating, and it was always a lease for 5 + 5, 10-year lease? So why is it that you're presenting today 10 + 5? When we communicated to the public that it was a temporary shelter and it would only be 5 + 5.
Because for the landlord to agree to the $17 a square foot, he indicated that he would only sign a 10-year lease. We also considered that we were putting considerable capital into the building, and through discussions with other city staff, we looked at how much our investment was going to be and the fact that we would most likely exercise that second option anyway.
Questions by Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, so Councillor Annunziata said this was originally a temporary shelter, is this correct?
That is correct.
Oh, so do you still deem it to be a temporary shelter?
That is correct.
So, okay, so it's still a temporary shelter, and so how long is the first lease for?
It's for a period of 10 years.
So that's till 2028?
It starts June 1st, 2018. So
June 1st, 2028 with an extension?
With 2 options to renew for an additional 5 years each. So that's our option.
So that's what you deem as temporary?
No, basically what I was trying to do is negotiate the best possible terms for the city to use it either for a shelter or for other city purposes. The options don't cost us anything.
Right, but you're indicating to the community that that's something that could go for a potential 20 years. That no longer looks like temporary, that looks like permanent.
Through the chair, the intention is to use this site as a shelter until the George Street site opens, and then to close it as a shelter. And it would be then the option of the city to use it for a different purpose or to not use it.
But this is an unusual arrangement, Mr. Chair, and also, so you must have some indication. We usually don't sort of decide that we've already got, unless we know what we're going to use it for, we don't normally enter into leases for some undefined, open arrangement, do we?
So, Mr. Mayor, given the fact that George Street, we haven't actually initiated that revitalization, we felt it's safer to err on the side of having options. As Mr. Raff just explains, the earliest George Street would be ready is 2025, so in the mid.
3 years. So you're giving yourself a 3-year buffer. And I guess you would do that given the fact that we seldom get projects completed on time.
And through the chair, we're still trying to secure the funding to actually start the project.
So my second question is could we arrange the extensions to be year over year as opposed to 5 years?
We could go back to the landlord with a counter offer, but to me, our ability to utilize the building for another 5 years, if we can negotiate a rate that's, I'll say, acceptable to the city or complementary to our needs, then, at least we have.
But it also constrains you as opposed to 1 year as opposed to 5 or nothing.
Frankly, we could go back after the 10 years and renegotiate each of the 5-year periods.
And just my other question, sorry, Mr. Chair, this is important because Councillor, yeah, it's very quick. Councillor Annunziata said to me that this particular location is not very well accessed by transit and is not therefore doesn't really serve the purpose very well for which it was meant. It's not great for a shelter because there's no transit around. Is that true?
Through the chair, no, the transit is adequate and the services in the area are adequate.
Okay.
All right. Sorry, we're not, you'll have, They'll have a chance to speak in a moment.
To be clear, I understand the notion of a temporary use, and I understand that things will revert back to normal in the longer term, and we're talking about 10 years. But I just want to make sure I understand Councillor Nunziata's original statement, and that is that when this thing went, I thought it went through a zoning process, to be honest. They had numerous consultations with the community, as opposed to just putting it in on an emergency basis. And my question is, on what basis was it put in? Emergency, yes, but did they have a time duration? Did they communicate to the public that the time duration would be 1, 2, 3 years? What? Well, if that's the case, what are we grappling with? If they were told that it would be on a temporary basis, but over a fairly lengthy duration, so what are we wrestling with here?
I will speak to that question when it comes time for speeches. I certainly will, if others don't want to. But does somebody want to say to staff? That was a question to the staff, not to me. As to what the public were told about the duration, that was the question.
So the public were told that it was a temporary shelter until the George Street George Street Revitalization project was complete, which would have been in the mid-2020s.
All right, so we're being consistent reasonably. That's fine. Thank you.
Are there any further questions of staff? All right, speakers. Councillor Nunziata.
Yes, I have a motion. What Councillor Palacio will move for me is that it be for 10 years with no options. It's on the screen. First of all, I really don't think it's fair that we should mislead the public and even mislead the committee here. First of all, when staff mentioned that there's services in the area, there are absolutely no services in the area. We're going to be spending millions of dollars to bring those services in. There's no services in Ward 11. There's no services along St.
No, I'm going to stop you there.
Yeah.
Because when we had an incident just recently at City Council involving a member who talked about staff misleading people, and I don't find that to be parliamentary language. That's certainly not acceptable to me as chair of the committee. And so I would like you to withdraw the fact that our staff are misleading people if you want to find another way to put that. But that it's just not right and fair that we should have our professional public service accused of misleading people in this committee or anywhere else.
I will withdraw the comment, but Mr. Mayor, this is what happened a year ago when we had the public meetings, the same thing. The staff presented my community with all these services, and they were all vacant lots. So we continue, and this is frustrating for me because we keep saying things and they're not there. As far as transit, there's no transit on St. Clair. There's a bus on Runnymede. So as far as we have enough transit in the area, we don't. We were communicated to my community that was a temporary shelter. And that's what they bought into. Originally, it was 100 beds. We got it down to 50 beds. They were all happy about that. They accepted that. This was a year ago, the negotiated lease. It's been a year later. We haven't been able to negotiate with the lease, with the landlord. The landlord's been very difficult. He's been going around communicating to my residents on the city negotiating the lease. There was private information that the landlord was communicating to the public. So my residents knew all about the negotiations even before the city knew, or even before I knew. So my community is very frustrated because they were told it was a temporary shelter. It was 5 plus 5. And now we have a lease because the landlord refused to sign the lease. We're paying them an extra month's rent. We're paying thousands of dollars in renovations. And as well, we have to extend the lease an additional 5 years because the landlord won't sign the lease. So what are we doing? Are we catering to these landlords? Or are we just throwing away money because landlords know that the city needs a shelter, so they're playing these mind games. They know that whatever they ask for, they're going to get. And that's going to continue for any future shelters. So I'm encouraging the committee to please support the motion that Councillor Palacio will move on my behalf. We have to be truthful to the residents. We can't continue without giving them false information.
Thank you, Councillor Nunziata. Other speakers?
Mr. Mayor, I just think this ties back to the last item, Councillor, the deputy on Councillor Mary Margaret McMahon's thing.